was not about the spring of 1950, except that it was late in coming. That was all. To the people of Winnipeg, it was good to be out walking again in the mild April afternoon. A drain backed up in somebody's basement, and that was too bad. But you stepped lightly over, no trouble. The signs of spring, the gushing waters of the Red, though strangely revealed. It was a sign, all right. There were other signs that this would be a season to be remembered. Refugees from the brown, slow waters of a river that had calmly raised itself 10 feet above their towns near Winnipeg, and that was even now moving north to the capital. There was something more than April in the air these days. Some were watching, keeping an eye on the Red, measuring its current. Others were waiting, not knowing exactly for what.
Gauge readings at the James Avenue pumping station show the Red River to have risen to 18.6 feet above datum. Residents in the following areas.
Some were taking no chances. The getting out was still good and wise. They didn't like the look of that river. And others, with equal realism, began the diking. People from a neighborhood here and there. People who could see the water heaving and shouldering against the banks nearby. Who could see the danger moving closer to their homes. People who could see a disaster coming. The flood was here, reclaiming the land it had owned many thousands of years ago. The flood was here, and it gave no heed to the pitiful signs men posted. No heed to what it was suddenly, swiftly doing to the lives of people, to the homes of ordinary men and women, and to the small share of worldly goods they had, through long, hard years, come to call their own. But they would fight back, these ordinary men and women, and now the fight was on. The city was in siege.
500 volunteers urgently needed at the dikes. Will cars please join this convoy? We will pick up additional workers at community centers en route. 500 volunteers urgently needed at the...
In every area of the city through which the Red was now careening, these people, together in a desperate struggle, 16, 20 hours through the days and nights of that early May, were learning to be fighters and learning fast. These were raw recruits, hurled into a battlefield. Grim reality was facing them, and they in turn had to meet it. The flood could deliver crippling blows to the lifeline of a city, cut the power, destroy communications, bring disease. But this city, if it went, would go down hard. They were learning, these people, of the strength there is in men in the face of disaster. But the flood was still growing. On May 6th, Brigadier General R.E.A. Morton assumed direction of all flood control activity. Under his command would be more than 4,000 servicemen, some 50,000 civilian volunteers. How enormous their task would become could already be foreseen. Here on the Canadian prairies was no localized overflowing of a river. This was flood at the full. Towns like Morris to the south stood now deserted islands in a lake 20 miles wide. Elevated roads had become spillways for the rampage. Deep beneath this water lay now the rich, abundant prairie earth. Cattle lay here somewhere as well, and horses and fowl that had to be destroyed. Townsfolk had held out to the last in places like this, and when there was no more hope, they took what they could carry and they left. Some waited too long, but no man surrenders quickly the fruits of all his toil, his home and his land. Now the flood was hitting Winnipeg, pressing at every gap. And everyone who could in this city of some 300,000 was hitting back. They had more to strike back with. From the armed services, additional vehicles were rushed forward. Army ducks appeared. Sandbags, the main artillery on this strange and weaving battlefront, were arriving by the hundreds of thousands in perhaps the largest airlift in Canadian history. 500,000 sandbags, almost 200,000 pounds of heavy equipment from points everywhere across the country and from the United States, raced to Winnipeg in 3 days of Operation Red Ramp. And the rest was up to these people. And behind the dikes, away from the gray, sprawling body of the flood, were reminders everywhere of the terrible resurgence this spring had brought. But there was strength in this city, and there was spirit. And in these days, turned raw again, there was much to be done. The evacuation of hospitals was organized. The river was creeping towards one, charging at another. Patients were carried and led to the waiting vehicles. They would be taken to other hospitals in other cities. And by May the 8th, the King George, King Edward, Princess Elizabeth, and St. Boniface hospitals were surrendered to the appetites of the flood. The plan was simple on the surface. Save whatever could be saved. But in the urgency of these desperate days, who could scale the importance of a call, list the priorities? To a poultryman, this hen house was his livelihood. It was like watching everything you have disappear. All those not involved in the battle against the Red were urged to leave the city. May the 11th, and 40,000 had already gone. 1/8 of Greater Winnipeg was underwater. Before a happier time would come, 1/3 of the population would move wearily in search of refuge elsewhere. But it was May the 11th now, and the Red stood moodily 1 block away from the key center of the city, Portage in Maine, and regarded it. No time yet to total the losses. A car could be hoisted, and with luck it would escape. But how much quarter could be expected from an enemy that would lean upon a house and press it afloat? This was no time to remember from how many fronts they had to fall back. St. Vital, Wildwood, Fort Garry, Riverview, Elmwood, East Kildonan. This was only a time for work. And the river, in its own good time, was looking around. But here at the power stations, they could not let it win. They did not let it win. Meanwhile, in the Civic Auditorium, where on this day in other years the graduates of Manitoba's University had been seated in solemn convocation, the enormous work and coordination of flood relief was going on. Clothing, food, emergency housing for evacuees, and always more specialized workers to be registered, for the flood was moving to its crisis. The Red was no longer a river, it was a sea. All of Canada was following the mounting struggle, rushing forward manpower and material to assist. But to grasp the extent of this disaster, no power but the eye could serve. Like an old performer, the flood was happy to go on with its ruthless show, if a little wind would encourage it, or the applause of a little rain. But the crucial moment was now at hand, and one way or another, this night, the victor would be named. No one felt brave or heroic. They just felt tired, numb, and they hoped that at last they had done it. May 18th, gauge reading 30.3 feet above datum. The uneasy balance of a city and a river. The waiting, the terrible calm. On the morning of May 20th, the Red River dropped 1/2 inch. The whole world had been watching, sending what help it could. And still another kind of aid was coming. From Britain, the United States, from all of Canada came sheets and pillowcases, surgical dressings, trucks, clothing, building equipment, and money. The estimate of damage was already in the tens of millions. There would be major financial grants and assistance, but each individual contribution would help and was welcome, large or small, from old or very young. And the flood at last was giving way. The news to these people at last looked all good. The water was receding. And now a man could turn to examine his own misfortune. There was something unreal about it all, hard to grasp. At first you just looked and didn't quite believe what you were seeing. You moved from room to room, but it didn't make sense. It didn't add up. And then you touched things, familiar things, as if you were rummaging through the attic and you noticed something you remembered. The piano caught your eye and you tried it out instinctively. You examined like a craftsman appreciating the art of another. You opened the stove the way you always did, and you thought it not at all strange to find a clock. You peered into the basement as if you were puttering on a Sunday. And it was all because you didn't know quite where to begin, how to start. How to bring order again out of this enormous chaos. But the people of Winnipeg, towards the end of this wet and weary May, with the days growing longer and kinder now, set themselves to their reconstruction. It was good to see the dikes going, the houses opening up to the sun again. The flood might come back and loose itself another year, but right now it was good to feel the city coming back, their city, to feel the press of the siege being lifted. And after a while, a long while, it would be good to remember the strength they had shown and how they did not let their city fall.